Hey guys, this is Solution Podfics, and today we're going to be reading Spider-Man Reborn by Reborn. This is Chapter 23. The safe house's silence felt both like a curse and a blessing. Jason walked into the bare back bedroom, glaring at the few pieces of furniture as if they would burst into flames with just a glance. An old stuffed duck sat at the edge of his bed where he left it, a red bow tied to its neck. Jason grabbed it. Damien's words battering his mind in the unending silence. How dared that little brat insinuate he was using Peter? He didn't need his little brother to make him feel better. Peter wasn't the problem anyway. It's Bruce, and the fucking Joker. It's Gotham, and it's crime. Is everything wrong with this city with no one willing to do what has to be done to fix it? The duck's beady eyes seemed to glare back at him. The wing clutched awkwardly in his fingers from where he held it. It felt as if even the duck was against Jason, taunting him in the same way Damien had. Jason didn't care what Damien thought of him. Grow up, that's what Damien said. As if Jason hadn't died. As if he was supposed to grow up after Ethiopia. He fucking died. Gripping the duck in his hand, Jason felt the wing and frame shrink in his grasp. He did grow up. Against all odds. He grew up. He lived. Jason Todd died, but he came back. What were they expecting? He wasn't the naive 15-year-old anymore. He wasn't just some sidekick, a child soldier for Batman to send out. They all were the ones to move on. Peter admitted it early on. He said they had accepted Jason had died. They never searched for him like Peter had. Dick had mentioned Peter running off to look for Jason a few times over the years. Is that how Peter lost Quack? What made Peter so sure that he could find Jason again after he died? Especially when the rest of the family were so quick to move on afterwards. Jason hadn't known what to think when he found the stuffed animal, abandoned in some park. It was only the few articles that mentioned Peter that told him he was okay. Jason couldn't have risked it to return the stuffed animal to Peter when he first saw it abandoned. He found the engraving on its flipper, from when Peter first received it, the affirming quality that the stuffed duck did in fact belong to his baby brother. The words are still as clear as the day he received it from Dick years ago. Fly like a robin, Peter. What was Dick thinking back then? Fly like a robin? Fall like one too. Jason threw the duck against the wall. He watched it bounce after the near-silent thud, landing just past the pillow. Peter didn't get it. He didn't understand, and hopefully he never will. Jason wasn't a good guy because he is and always will be a killer. He can't stop until the Joker is dead and buried. Peter didn't need to be around that. He doesn't need to see it. Bruce won't let him stay either, no matter what Peter said. Not while Jason killed each night. Not while Bruce was just as at fault as the Joker himself. Peter was safer in the manor, and far from Jason and Crime Alley. He was safe away from his brother and the fucked up nightlife their family has. No, Jason had work to do, and none of which could be done with Peter hanging around. This is for the better. At least, until he can get rid of the Joker, ensuring the clown can't get a hold of his baby brother. Peter's heart broke as he sat in his room alone. He left for it immediately after his brother left. He couldn't run back to the woods since Mr. Williams was coming over to talk with his dad about him and Nate's schemes. Peter was sure he'd be grounded again for that, but he couldn't care. Not when he just had his brother ripped away from him. He wanted Quack back. He wanted Jason home. Peter just wanted his family back together. Why was it so hard? Why was everyone so bent on leaving or dying? Father is in the study with Mr. Williams. They require your presence. Damien knocked on the door, standing on the other side without opening it. Damien had been mean to Jason before, too. Come in, Damie. Peter wiped at his eyes, sniffling. He needed answers, and Damien is the only one who could tell him anything. He riled up Jason enough for him to leave. Damien couldn't have done it just to be cruel. Peter couldn't believe that. He didn't want to. He watched Damien enter. His brother looked him over before taking his seat at the desk across from him. Peter waited for him to say anything, but after a minute of silence, he figured his brother was not planning to share anything. Why did you do that? Are you referring to Todd? Damien raised an eyebrow, frowning at him. He is immature. While I accept that he is your brother, he's your brother too! Peter interrupted, scowling. Of course. He rolled his eyes as Peter threw his pillow at him. Damien caught it, resting it on his lap before continuing. Todd believes himself someone to be hated. You will only tire yourself by trying to change his mind when he is unwilling to accept your words. He may not hurt you physically, but you do not need to be around him whilst he is discovering what he truly wants. Peter frowned down at Zitka, considering his words. Jason thought he was dangerous, even when Peter tried to tell him otherwise. It would hurt if Jason never believes him, but what if he does? He has to eventually. Peter just... Oh, that's why Damien had been so mean. Damien doesn't want Peter going out of his way for Jason when he's still just a kid. Damie... Peter stared at his brother. His lips wobbled as the words finally settled in. Damien was just trying to protect Peter, too. Peter entered his dad's study, spotting Nate sitting on the couch immediately. Yeah, they really were in trouble. Mr. Williams stood beside his dad. Both men had their arms crossed as Peter walked further into the office. Have a seat, Peter, his dad spoke, sitting on the couch while Mr. Williams followed him. Peter sat onto the couch with Nate, whispering a quiet apology for getting them caught. Now, who wants to start? Nate chewed his lip as Peter glanced at him. Peter had gotten used to getting in trouble, but he didn't usually drag others in with him. Well, usually they were more aware of the level of trouble they got into when they did. I'm sorry, Peter started, only for Nate's hand to cover his mouth. It was my fault. I wanted to visit Dylan, and Peter agreed to help me. Nate rushed out before Peter managed to lick his hand. His friend squealed, jumping back as he gripped his hand. Gross, Peter. It was my idea, Peter argued back. Everything was already going wrong. He couldn't somehow lose Nate, too. I just wanted to see Jason. Nuh-uh, I came up with it. No, you didn't. Did too. Nate grappled with Peter, both of them rolling off the couch as they wrestled behind the coffee table. Peter barely paid any attention to his dad as he twisted out of Nate's grasp, pinning him to the ground. You wanted to swim in the river. Nate kicked him, pulling Peter back to the ground as he groaned dramatically in an attempt to disguise the fact that the kick hardly hurt. Yeah, well, you wanted to hitchhike to Crime Alley. That's enough, his dad sighed, lifting both of them up by the back of their shirts. Peter whined, throwing one final kick at Nate, who retaliated with his longer legs actually reaching him. Enough! Peter couldn't help but giggle as he was dropped back onto the couch with Nate. He leaned onto his friend, watching his dad take a seat again. Both dads sighed wearily as they eyed them from across the table. They were still in trouble, but at least Nate didn't blame him for any of it. He kept his weight against him, smiling a little. Let's start over, okay? Peter, you start. Can you track Steph's phone? Tim asked his phone as the blue orb shifted to follow the pitch of his voice. Peter sat beside him, leaning halfway on the table to watch as the screen shifted to a map of Gotham. They waited as the map zoomed in, collecting data before settling over a building as information popped up beside it. Where are you, Steph? Peter asked into his phone with the speaker button lit up. Batburger on East and Malt. Did it work? Peter's cheer was answer enough to her question as Tim grinned back at him. It worked. Stark can now track phones throughout Gotham. They only needed to tweak a few codes before they could track outside of Gotham. Maybe connect to the watchtower and track globally? Tim could just imagine the use of Stark once they've added all the upgrades Peter had listed in his first draft of the AI. Peter shouted his goodbyes before hanging up, grinning up at Tim. It worked! Tim smiled. He was still on the fence of leaving to live in Drake Manor or someplace new, but with Peter being grounded and Jason leaving, he just needed some time. It was obvious that Peter would be heartbroken. Tim knew he would. It was just a matter of time, though, before Peter would move on. He pushed those thoughts aside. After all, he has a project with Peter to finish. It did. Good job, Pete. Tim ruffled his little brother's hair. We'll try out the facial recognition scanner tomorrow. Some of the codes that need to be altered for better results, but we can test it out later. Peter agreed easily, falling behind Tim as they locked up the lab. Tim finished faster, waiting at the door as Peter locked the cabinets. He knew Peter missed Jason. It's only been 2 weeks since the Red Hood's identity was revealed, and Jason came home for a single day before leaving again. He knew his brother hated not having Jason close. Peter hated when any of them left for longer than a day, not to mention Jason didn't have a phone that he held onto for longer than a 48-hour period. Tim still didn't feel comfortable even knowing Jason was in Gotham, but the Red Hood had calmed down a lot since then. He still killed occasionally, but even Bruce was turning a blind eye to those few of deaths. And Peter? Tom felt bad for him. He was obviously anxious knowing his brother was so close and far away at the same time. He'd chewed through a few batarangs already, and Bruce had made some batarangs with protheum for him to gnaw on despite his fangs having already grown in. Peter didn't have the same pain anymore, but has taken to chewing when he was anxious. It was safe when he had something, but when his supplies of batarangs were locked up, he tended to be a little more reactive with everyone. Duke has a new scar in the shape of twin circles on his arm when he patted Peter's head when he was worried. Peter had felt so guilty afterwards. Everyone knew to be a little cautious with the youngest when he struggled with the knowledge of Jason not staying with them. Want to go for a drive? Tim suggested, watching Peter perk up. But I'm grounded, he grinned, already knowing that Tim didn't care. What's Bruce gonna do about it? You'll be with me. Peter sat in the back seat as Tim drove further away from Wayne Manor. He didn't know where Tim wanted to go, but Peter was just glad to be out of the house. His dad had decided that Peter would be under house arrest for a month and not hang out with friends for the rest of the summer. It felt like overkill, but Peter couldn't dissuade his dad. He had been sneaking out into Crime Alley to chase after the Red Hood for weeks, but that is dad noticing after all. His mom says he's jealous that Peter was so good at sneaking around. Still, it was nice that Tim was willing to sneak Peter out. He watched as they drove into the city, music playing softly as Tim sang along to it. He hadn't said where they were going, but Peter didn't really care. They drove further into the city, turning left towards the river. Peter watched the buildings curiously as they started to turn more familiar. Where are we going? Peter asked. Maybe he did care a little about the destination. You'll see. Tim grinned into his rearview mirror before turning back to the dilapidated street. Peter noted the tightness in his brother's eyes. Concern ate away at him the longer Tim sang to the lyrics. He knew that Tim didn't like that he brought Jason home for a day, Peter hadn't found the right time to talk to him about it either. How do you bring up bringing your brother's near murderer home? What could Peter say? Something was wrong with Tim since then, but he always brushed off Peter's attempts at bringing it up. He hated not being able to help, hating how any time he tried, Steph intervened or Tim distracted him with the lap time. They've entered Crime Alley now. Peter focused out the window, his mind trapped in a hamster wheel of potential plans. Each one thrown out to be recycled. Something has to work. He has to fix this somehow. They came to a stop in front of a large building as Peter rested his hand on his knees, eyeing the tall building and the gargoyles snarling down at them. Tim waited behind the wheel, tapping his fingers on it as he continued to hum. Were they waiting for someone? Peter watched the building, looking for something or someone that Tim brought him there to see. People walked past the car, some eyeing it from the alleys or doorways. He had no idea why they were there. Was Tim trying to get rid of him? Was he trying to get him in more trouble with their dad? A knock on the window broke Peter from his thoughts, startling him as blue eyes peered into the car. Jason grinned as he screamed, Tim laughing from the front seat. Go on. You have the afternoon with Jason, but then I'm taking you home. You gotta be back before dinner, okay? Tim smiled, turning around from the driver's seat to look at Peter. Tim brought him to see Jason? Tim hates Jason, though. Why was Tim... Really? Yeah, go have fun, Tim nodded, laughing when Peter tried pulling him in for a hug. It was awkward with the seat in the way, but Peter kissed his cheek before shooting out of the back seat. Jason immediately catches him for a proper hug. Peter couldn't wipe the smile off his face as he walked down the street with Jason at his side. He hadn't expected to see Jason again since he'd been grounded, and Jason left, and he's here, and Peter's here. He owed Tim so much when he went back. Let's get some lunch, Jason suggested, leading Peter towards the Batburger across the street. Peter followed him, holding his hand as they crossed the road together. Damien had a point when he said Peter would always try and help, but he didn't know that Peter didn't care. He would always try to help, even if it seemed pointless, because really, what if it worked? What if Jason did accept Peter's words and believed it too? He would try for the chance that it could work out. After they ordered, Peter picked the booth. They sat near the window to watch the passerbys, while also being close to the corner for Jason's comfort. Peter took his milkshake, excited for the food. He already had lunch before coming here, but since the bite, Peter's been a lot more hungry. Alfred always made him larger portions that Dr. Tompkins laid out for Peter. It was enough for Peter, but that didn't mean he couldn't have a snack. How have you been, kid? Jason asked, leaning back into his seat. I'm grounded. Those words really encompassed it all in Peter's mind. He was generally trapped at home unless he was visiting Nate or going out with his siblings or mom. His dad worried a lot about Peter being out. A kidnapping, Joker hostage situation, and Crime Alley adventures have really caused his dad to go gray. Peter was pretty sure he saw some gray reflect off his dad's hair that morning. He wondered how long it would be before his hair was as white as Mr. Fox's. Yeah, that's never fun, Jason chuckled. You know what you were getting into, Pete. Why did you never stop? What do you mean? Peter frowned, watching as Jason sighed. The number was called as Jason slid out of his seat to grab their food. Why didn't he stop what? He watched as Jason carried their trays over to him. Peter spotted his Batburger and freeze fries. Grinning, Peter sat up straighter as the tray was placed in front of him. Thank you. You're welcome. Jason sat down across from him again, unraveling his own burger. I mean, why did you think I was still alive? Oh, because you're Jason. Peter frowned, thinking on it. He always believed Jason was alive because it was easier than accepting his brother died. It was easier to live in the manor without him, as long as he thought that Jason was just living somewhere else. I didn't want you to be dead. I couldn't. I had to believe it. Jason frowned, watching him silently as Peter focused on his burger. I worried about you, you know. You were a troublemaker even when you only knew how to crawl. Peter made a face at those words. He didn't cause that much trouble when he was a baby. I don't cause trouble. It just happens, Peter grumbled, biting into his burger to ignore Jason's laugh. Half of the trouble just happens. Jason led Peter to Robinson Park after they finished eating. Peter decided to stay close to Jason this time. Parks never felt the same since his first trip. The trees were just a little too suspicious when the branches waved by the wind. They walked down the path, Jason telling him a story about Paris and bread. His brother might have died, but he got to see the world. Peter knew his stories were heavily sugar-coated with whatever happened to him, or whatever he did while there. He was trying to protect Peter from those parts, but Peter didn't mind. He was just glad his brother could still recall them without feeling scared or in danger. The park was unsurprisingly crowded as kids went to play during their summer break. Peter watched them from Jason's side. Dick had once said that this park was dangerous, but under the sun, even clouded by Gotham's smog, it didn't look like it. Peter, please tell me you aren't being kidnapped again. Peter gasped, turning to see Sabrina standing a few paces away with her hand on her hip. Her green eyes were shielded behind glasses today with her hair in a ponytail. She wasn't dressed like a businesswoman this time, wearing leggings and a leather jacket. It suited her. Sabrina! Peter left Jason's side, bounding up to her with a grin. Robin didn't hurt you, right? I told him that you were nice. Gee, thanks, kid, Sabrina smirked, patting his head. I was fine. What are you doing here? Peter glanced at the kids before frowning. You're not going to steal any of them, right? Jason coughed behind him, but Peter kept his focus on Sabrina, only breaking it when he tried finding Patrick in the crowd. Jesus, kid, do you think I just steal kids every day? That was a one-off, I swear. I think I'm missing something here, Jason tried to intervene, stepping closer to Peter. Then why are you at the park? I've got a kid, brat. Not like any of that's your business, Sabrina sighed. Peter could only beam. A little Sabrina sounds like fun. He wondered if her kid looked like her. Were they just as blunt? Jason rested a hand on Peter's shoulder, drawing his attention. A singular raised eyebrow was enough for Peter to know he wanted more information. Did anyone tell him that he'd been kidnapped before? Sabrina kidnapped me to make Dad pay her a lot of money. It didn't work, but she was really nice. Once, Sabrina reiterated. And he wasn't hurt. He's a good kid, but you know how it is. Funny, I thought you died. Once, Jason hummed, glaring at her. Maybe you should keep an eye on your own kid. Peter eyed them warily. She was nice, and she let me use her phone to watch cartoons. Be nice. Mom! A girl ran towards them, blonde hair and a similar leather jacket with pins coloring to the left. She must be Sabrina's kid, though calling her mom was the most obvious tell there. Can I please go to Jody's? I'm bored here already. No, play at the park like a normal kid. You'll turn into a vampire if you play inside all the time. Sabrina rolled her eyes, smirking down at her daughter. Peter watched them interact with Jason beside her. Who are you? The girl turned to glare at Peter. Peter smiled, holding out a hand. I'm Peter. Who are you? I'm Gwen. You look like a nerd. Do you like music? Peter grinned, nodding his head as Gwen took his hand. Great, come on. Peter followed her, curious about Sabrina's kid. She was definitely blunt. It was refreshing. 1 hour max, Pete, Jason called after them. Tim pulled away as soon as he waved at Peter, his heart racing. Counting his breaths while singing was the only thing he could think of to keep Peter from noticing his anxiety. Peter would have called him out for his heartbeat if he didn't keep that up. Unsurprisingly, Peter became more of a mother hen with his enhanced senses than he was before. Pretty soon, Dick and Peter would be fighting for the title. If Dick would ever fight Peter, anyway. Jason might not be at the manor, but fuck. Him staying in Gotham was still too much for Tim. He had tried, hoping the idea that Jason wasn't staying at home would make things better, but it hadn't. Peter had been moping more often, staring out the window and stealing Bruce's newspapers to read about anything related to Red Hood. Tim couldn't even remember how he managed to call Jason to plan this. It blurred in his mind. All he knew was the date was planned. Peter could spend time with Jason, and Tim could look at apartments. Tim had compiled a list for him to check, and now was the perfect time to look over them. Once Peter catches wind of this, Tim knew he would feel too guilty to continue. He had to find someplace soon before he could back out. The first place felt too big, too empty just for him. Tim toured it with the agent, but all he could think about was the empty space and extra room. The second one felt too modern. It was the exact opposite of Wayne Manor, but reminded him enough of his own family home. There was a reason he decided against staying in Drake Manor in the end, so that was crossed off the list too. The third place wasn't too big, but it still had the extra room. Maybe Steph could move in with him. Tim eyed the windows. The view of the city opened up from the west side view. Peter would love the view. His brother would be just as willing to climb to the roof from it, though. The view is beautiful here, the agent started, walking forward a little to join him by the windows. It's hard moving away from family, but the spare room could be the perfect guest bedroom for any of them to visit, Mr. Drake. I don't think they'll be visiting that much, Tim glared forward. Jason's back after all. He needed to go pick up Peter soon anyway. I'll call you tomorrow with my decision. Maybe Steph found some single-bedroom apartment, or house. Tim just needed someplace smaller. Jason made sure Peter got back to Tim's car before he headed back into the apartment. Peter waved at his back as his other brother pulled away. He ended up listening to music and talking to Gwen for the entire hour before Jason took him to the movies until he asked to meet Tim for dinner. All in all, Peter had a great time. He even had Gwen's number now for the next time he goes back to Crime Alley. Sabrina made him promise to try not to visit them without at least Jason making sure he was safe, but well, Sabrina doesn't know he's been fined before when running off alone. He leaned back into his seat, smiling out the window. Looks like you had a good day, Tim started, glancing at him. Yeah. Oh, I made a new friend. Peter perked up, regaling this story to Tim. You befriended your kidnapper's kid? Are you sure they're related? Mm-hmm. She's just like Sabrina, Peter laughed. Gwen was cool. Jason promised to get him a leather jacket too, and she promised to get him some pins for it. He hoped he could convince his dad to let him visit Gwen and Sabrina. She might not pass the background check, but his mom might help him there. So you like her then? Tim cackled, his eyes lighting up in the rearview mirror. She's pretty. She's pretty? I guess. Gwen is pretty cool. Peter made a face at Tim. He does like her. She's interesting. She wants to be a drummer when she grows up, and apparently Sabrina was saving up to get her a drum set. Peter stared out the window as they crossed the bridge. He hoped his dad wouldn't catch them, but he knew better than that. Still, he had a great day and had a lot of fun with Jason and Gwen. The closer they got to the manor, the more worried Peter became. He just knew his dad noticed. Tim stopped his teasing as they turned into the driveway. Alfred opened the gate for them, the iron rock gate sliding open as Tim inched forward. Peter watched the door as they approached, spotting the two figures of his parents standing in front of the door. Yeah, they knew. Tim stopped beside them, silently turning off the car as they left to face the music. Where were you? His dad raised an eyebrow as he stared down at both of them. Peter needed to get out of the house, Bruce. Tim spoke up, crossing his arms. He misses Jason. Are you really going to keep him from his own brother? Go inside, Tim. Peter frowned, sharing a look with Tim before pushing him towards the door. He didn't want Tim getting in trouble for this. It was Peter's turn to take the fall. He watched Tim climb the stairs as his mom knelt beside him, checking him over. His dad turned once Tim disappeared inside to focus on Peter. Well? Peter crossed his arms, staring up at his dad. I made Tim take me to Jason. He met a girl, Tim yelled out before slamming the door shut again. Peter flushed as his mom's eyes lit up. A girl? Oh, tell me all about her, kitten. What's she like? What's her name? His mom took his face in her hands, grinning brightly at the information. You're a little young, but oh, kitten love. Bruce, we have to invite her to dinner. Why were they making a big deal about it? Peter just made a new friend. He didn't, love her. Gross. Selena. His dad tried, frowning as his mom changed the subject. Oh no, Bruce, darling. Our son met a girl. You can be a grouch all you like, but I'm not turning our little boy into a Rapunzel. Remember, he can send you to a nursing home when you get old. I've already made my point, but I'll repeat it here. He is not in trouble for visiting his brother. If he meets a girl along the way, well, I will hear all about it, and you can go lecture your reflection. His mom stood up, taking Peter's hand as she led him towards the house. Come on, Kit, you're not in trouble for today. If you ever want to see Jason or this girl of yours, you tell me. Peter grinned, giggling at his dad's face as he followed her. Guess he wasn't in trouble for today after all. Alright guys, and that is the end of chapter 23 of Spider-Man Reborn by Careerin. I hope you guys liked it, and I'll see you in the next chapter.